This is a streaming sound check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Good evening, and thank you for watching. My name is Hank Stevenson. I'm the co-founder of the Arizona Agenda, a daily newsletter covering Arizona politics and government, and I'll be moderating this evening's debate. The Citizens Clean Election Commission is the sponsor of this event. As the state's voter education agency, Clean Elections hosts debates so voters have the opportunity to hear directly from the candidates, ask questions on the issues that matter most to them, and vote informed. Candidates that have a contested general election have been invited to participate in this debate. Please note, candidates from both the House and Senate are participating in the debate tonight. As a moderator, I'll do my best to ensure candidates have the opportunity to engage directly with their respective opponents. The questions we're asking tonight come directly from voters. Leading up to the debates, Clean Elections conducted voter outreach across the state asking for questions for the candidates. Additionally, Clean Elections surveyed voters to learn what issues are important to them. This survey data, along with input from the experienced journalists at the Arizona Agenda, the Arizona Capital Times, and the Green Valley News and Sahuarita Sun, have been utilized to guide the discussion so it best serves the voters. Of course, we want to hear directly from you, the voters. So, voters that are watching this debate live, you can submit a question at any time. Do that via email, debates@kc-a.com, or you can text them in to 480-808-1814, or you can even call them in 480-937-1253. Please specify if your question is for a specific candidate or all candidates. We screen questions for clarity to eliminate duplication, speeches, or personal attacks on candidates. This debate is scheduled for about an hour, so we may not get to all audience questions, but we'll do our best. Tonight, we're hearing from candidates in Legislative District 11, which covers Sky Harbor through South Phoenix down to Levine. Candidates, you'll have about a minute for your opening and closing statements and a minute, 2 minutes for your responses to voter questions. We encourage an open exchange of dialogue between opponents. If you feel the need to respond to another candidate's comments, you may do so. I may limit responses for time management purposes, and we remind the candidates and the audience that this is a respectful, courteous, and professional environment. Our goal tonight is to connect candidates and voters so our electorate may vote informed. All right, our candidates tonight, running for the state Senate, Marin Brannies, a Republican. Catherine Miranda, the Democrat in the race, chose not to join us tonight. In the House, voters get to vote for 2 candidates. Your candidates are Tatiana Peña, a Republican, Marcelino Quiñones, a Democrat, and Oscar de los Santos, a Democrat. And Ms. Brannies, why don't you start us off with your opening statements tonight?
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you for having us. Thank you for hosting us. I think this is very important for the people to have access to be able to make informed decisions. My name is Marin Brannies, and I'm again running for state Senate. I'm just a regular everyday citizen. I'm a small business owner. I'm a referee. I'm a homeowner. I'm firmly attached to the South Side. You know, I'm going to be here forever. I have no plans of leaving, and I'm here to rebuild the community, restore community safety, and give us what we're paying for when it comes to our taxes. We're paying for resources and not getting them. And I'm here to be the people's voices. And I've chosen the highlighter color to highlight the overlooked issues within our community, as well as the citizens' voices. And you know, I think that people have been screaming from the rooftops every single day. They're going to Phoenix 360. Every day we're going to Nextdoor and Facebook and complaining about 51st Avenue and Baseline and the same old issues. And the same old issues, and we keep pumping money out and we're not fixing these issues. So I hope to be a voice for the community, and I hope to put some money back in their pockets and actually resolve some of their problems together as a community. So thank you for having me.
Okay, thank you very much. House candidates, Ms. Peña, why don't you start us off?
Thank you, Hank. And I just wanted to say thank you to the Clean Elections for hosting this debate. I also want to thank everyone who's here, including my opponents on the other side. It's wonderful to have everyone here to have this important discussion about our community. My name is Tatiana Peña. I was born and raised in South Phoenix. I'm actually the first generation American born. Both my parents came from Central America to Arizona, to South Phoenix. And I've always loved my community, and I've always had a deep desire to help fix the issues that we are facing. I did run in 2020 for the first time, and I was inspired to run again this time because you learn and you grow, and then you still see that there are still needs that are not being met. Some of the things that I'm focused on, number one is I think it's important to have someone that actually is in the legislature that does what they say they're going to do. We're used to getting elected officials that say one thing when they're in front of you, and then if you actually pay attention to the bills that they're proposing and that they're voting on, they're doing something completely opposite. Sometimes it's stuff that you would find atrocious, to be honest with you, and I'll be sharing some of those things tonight. So that is a huge important thing. We're seeing that our community is facing a lot of safety issues. Marin touched on that a little bit. I didn't grow up with homeless people that were high on the corners. I'm raising 4 little girls right now with my husband. I don't want them thinking that's a normal thing to do. We're also facing a society where our values have been forced to change, and they're trying to force that change on everyone, including families of religious values. I want to protect those values. I want to protect your First Amendment right. I want to make sure that we don't ever see the government take over our lives, because our government is a constitutional government. We need to protect that. So I also want to let everyone know that I want to represent everyone in the community, regardless if you're a registered Democrat, Independent, Republican. It doesn't matter to me. What matters to me is to be a representative of the community, to be the voice. And if it means that I have to butt heads with people in the legislature that are in my party, then so be it. I'm willing to do that. Tonight, I'm reaching out to 54,000 registered Democrats and Independents via text message. So if you get a message from me, I just want to send you some extra love right now, let you know I meant it, and I hope that you feel the love. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Quinones.
Thank you, Hank. Hello, Clean Elections. Thank you so much for hosting this debate for the LD11 seats. I also want to thank the candidates for being here tonight. And then I want to thank the audience members for taking part in democracy. Last December, I was appointed to serve as the state representative in LD11, and I'm really proud of what I've been able to accomplish in only one session. We passed a historic bipartisan budget that brought over $1 billion to public education. We passed a historic bipartisan budget that brought $1 billion to water, because Arizona is currently facing a water shortage. 200 million of those is going to go into conservation efforts, because we can't buy our way out of this issue. But the reality is this, folks. We still have a lot of work to do. Reproductive rights here in Arizona are under attack, and I am here to advocate and fight for healthcare on behalf of all individuals. Our public schools still need support beyond the dollars. And then finally, democracy is at stake. We have individuals on the other side who are intent on ensuring that the election of 2020 was inaccurate and unsecure. And that's simply not true, because what they're telling you is that if you vote different from them and you disagree, then they're not going to respect your vote. I'm a product of this community, a graduate of South Mountain, a 2-time Sun Devil, an educator, and an artist. And I look forward to continuing to be your voice at the Arizona legislature. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. De Los Santos.
Thank you, Hank, and thank you, everybody, for joining us. My name is Oscar De Los Santos, and I'm very proud to be one of the Democratic nominees to represent you and your family in the Arizona House of Representatives. I live over on 35th and Baseline. I'm a former 6th grade public school teacher in the district, and I've worked in the Association of Arizona Food Banks as their legislative advocate, fighting to make sure that the most vulnerable among us, senior citizens and children, have enough food to eat and don't go hungry. I have led my life in public service, and I've dedicated my career to this community. And I'm proud that that leadership has been recognized. I was named as Arizona's Rhodes Scholar, and had the opportunity to get a full ride to the University of Oxford, where I earned a master's degree in public policy and joined the ranks of people like Senator Cory Booker and President Bill Clinton. I've been very blessed in my life, and I believe that these blessings are not bestowed only on me, they are bestowed upon this community that has been giving me so much. And that is why I am running. I am running because we have had one party rule in the legislature, the Republican Party, and what have we gotten? Some of the worst funded schools, some of the most poorly paid teachers in the nation, massive tax breaks for the wealthy, and for families, no paid family leave. The priorities of the Republican legislature have been upside down. While breast milk or breast pumps and baby milk is taxed, yachts, private jets, and country club memberships are not. I am the only candidate in this race that has been endorsed by the Arizona Education Association, which is the teachers union, the construction workers of this state, the nurses of the state, and Planned Parenthood. And I look forward to this debate, and I look forward to earning your support. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, candidates. On to the questions. Let's talk a little bit about the economy first. Arizonans are suffering some of the highest inflation rates in the country. What can you as a state legislator do to ease that burden on Arizona families? And let's start with the House candidates. Ms. Pena, why don't you kick this off?
So I think that what we need to do is we need to make sure that we ease the burden on the taxpayer. Right now, we could look at the sales tax. I know that there has been discussion about, food tax, like when people are buying their groceries, when people are going out to food, if there could be an ease on that sort of tax. And I think that's a genius idea because everyone needs to eat. So if we're being taxed on that, that's going to, that hurts us. And obviously we see the prices on tax going up. There's also talks about gas prices and the taxes for the gas. We have to understand that we as legislators, we can set the bounds on, our imports coming inside. And so if we're making things difficult, like let's look at our neighbor next door, California. California likes to raise taxes on gas because they want people to go to electric cars. And I would think that my colleagues here on the other side are probably leaning for some of those ideas too. They want to go to more clean energy. That might be great in a community that can afford it. But in our community here, especially because so many of us are hard workers and we have work trucks and, we haul things, an electric vehicle is just not going to do it for us and we can't afford it. But we need to make sure that we do not bring any of those regulations here to Arizona because it's not going to help anyone. It's not going to make anything affordable. We need to look at our taxing. We need to see how can we lower these taxes more and more. Everyone knows it's the stereotype. Everyone knows Republicans are for less taxes for everyone. Everyone knows that. All you have to do is look next door to California and see what do they do to everyone, regardless if they're rich or if they're poor. They keep taxing them to oblivion, and then they can't afford anything. And then we're wondering why we keep getting more neighbors from California, which I welcome them, but I do not welcome those policies here. So I want to make sure that we keep this state more affordable. And I want to make sure that we ease the burdens that people are facing because of the current administration and what they've done with the economy.
Okay. Mr. Quinones?
Thank you. That is a wonderful question. My Democratic colleague, Oscar, touched on this. The Republicans have been in control of the House since the 1960s. Since then, they've continued to implement policies that directly go counter to communities. He mentioned, and this is true, and I know because I voted against it every single time. There have been propositions and bills that are brought forth so that individuals that own jets and airplanes get a tax cut. That doesn't work. That doesn't work for the average person. This session, I voted against it every single time it came up. We need to look at also the bigger picture, which is the reality is that there are things that are going around the world that are directly impacting inflation here in the United States. The violent attack that the Russians have implemented on Ukraine are directly impacting imports being sent over to other parts of the world. The other thing that we need to do is we need to invest in infrastructure so that our roads are safe and healthy. And in that manner, everything can be transported and arrive at our people's homes. And then additionally, we need to look at education and ensure that our community colleges and our trade schools are producing high quality individuals so that those jobs can be filled. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. De Los Santos?
Sure, we are facing an inflationary crisis, and I want to touch on this a little bit in terms of sources and solutions. As Representative Quinones mentioned, this is an extraordinarily complex crisis that we're not only facing in Phoenix or Arizona or even the United States of America. We are facing a global inflationary crisis that was set on by the COVID-19 pandemic, restricted supply chains, and the like. And frankly, the solutions to the inflationary crisis are going to have to be dealt with at the federal and at the international level. The government at the national level has levers that the state government does not have to deal with inflation, monetary policy and fiscal policy, such as setting interest rates and setting taxes and budgets that can actually impact the inflationary crisis. So what we have got to be focused, though, at the state level is ameliorating the effects, the negative effects of the inflationary crisis on the workers and the families in our community. That is what our focus has got to be. And the fact is, as the representative touched on, that the Republicans have been in charge of this state government for decade after decade and have not done that. We have no paid family leave, and a massive share of families' budgets are going to really expensive childcare. We should not be doing that. We should be providing high quality childcare options so families aren't having to shove money into simple childcare. That should be something that is provided publicly. The second thing is, because we are in the middle of an inflationary crisis, we may be heading toward a recession. And if that is the case, our state government needs to be prepared to act to take care of the most vulnerable. We need to make sure we do not have an eviction crisis. We need to make sure that we're being prepared to put in place an eviction moratorium. We need to make sure that we're going to have strong supports for our unemployment insurance program. We need to make sure that we're going to have state monies available going to social service agencies, including food banks, so people don't go hungry if they lose their jobs. And something that's very important to point out here is that when we have tied healthcare to jobs, as we have in this country, when you lose your job in a recession, you don't just lose your income, you also lose your healthcare, which is why I believe we need universal healthcare that is not contingent upon whether or not you're working. We need to have that safety net there for everybody. And finally, whether or not we're in an inflationary crisis, we have got to address the upside down, backwards tax system that we have that is balancing this budget, the state budget, on the backs of workers and families while letting the richest people and corporations get away without paying their fair share. Get this. Capital gains taxes, which is how capital gains are the gains that really rich people and corporations make on their investments. They're taxed on those gains at a significantly lower rate than you are taxed on the income you make from work. I think that is ridiculous. We have got to level the playing field and make sure that workers are getting a tax break and that the wealthiest and the corporations are paying their fair share. You will hear a lot of talk from the Republican Party. God bless them. You will hear a lot of talk about low taxes for everybody. It's low taxes for their funders, the wealthiest among us and the corporations. That has got to end.
Okay, Ms. Brannies, you're following that one. Unmute.
Well, you know, a lot of what I heard is what we have to keep giving out. We have to provide more education. We have to provide eviction moratorium. We have to provide food. We have to provide jobs. When did we stop believing in the American spirit and the human being? I mean, when did that ever even become the government's job? That's never been the government's job to provide for us. If you want to provide education, go do it. No one's stopping you. You want to provide food for somebody, go do it. Nobody's stopping you. That's not a governmental decision to take everybody else's tax dollars and play socialist hero with the money. We all have dreams. We all have nonprofit ideas. But it's not okay to keep pilfering from the everyday citizen and then asking how we fix our inflation problems. Easy, stop taking their money. Real easy. When all else fails, go back to basics. If you get government out of the way, because I mean, what's one thing ever that the government has touched monetarily and made it a success? And if it is a success, as soon as the government touches it, it's no longer a success. The last thing they did monetarily successful that I recall in our area was maybe the Hoover Dam, but I wouldn't say that was a testament to the government. I would say that would be a testament to the workers of the time and the work ethic of the time. So why don't we stop waiting for handouts and quit being baby birds and start being Americans and start planting our own food and start creating our own safety and start waiting on everybody to save us? So that's how you lower inflation. You stop giving the power to the government and you give it back to the people where it has always belonged.
If I may, what the candidate is advocating for is anarchy. It is unordered liberty. And with all due respect, it is a rather wild conception of how society should be run. What I heard was that we need to get rid of Social Security, that she wants to abolish your Medicare. She wants to get rid of public roads. She wants to close down your public schools. She wants to close down your public schools.
She did not say that.
She wants to make sure that nobody, excuse me, she wants to make sure that nobody is testing the water that you're drinking. She wants, when you call the fire department,
You're just making it
no one's gonna answer the phone
I'll let
because
you
you need to
respond.
apparently get rid of government. That is a rather strange conception of community. I believe that we need to be coming together and working together to make sure that we're solving our problems. We shouldn't be attacking Social Security. We shouldn't be advocating for the destruction of public education.
Okay, Ms. Pena, you wanted to respond? Or
Yeah, I mean,
Thank you very much. Oh,
I think it's really unfair for Oscar to take what she said and completely flip it around and say things she didn't say at all. What she's saying, and you know, Oscar, you and I were on different realms of the world, okay? You're very socialist, and it scares me because I really want to ask you, where does money come from? Where do all these programs that you want to put in place, where do they come from? I've seen the same things be advocated for when I was in California with my husband. I've seen them keep doing that over there. And guess what? No one can afford anything because money isn't free. Nothing is free. Guess why we are where we are? And you know what? I know you want to deny it. We're in a recession. Please say it. And please own the fact that the current administration led us there. Okay? Bad policies from the federal government came into place. And this is why we're facing what we're facing. People here in the South Side, when they're at that gas pump, they're seeing it. They're feeling it. When they're at the grocery store, they're seeing it. They're feeling it. We were giving stimulus checks and stimulus checks and stimulus checks, and then everything rose. Basic economic principles. You do not have free money. It has an impact on the entire economy. It raises everything. This is just basic economic principles. So, Oscar, with all due respect, when you're going to rebut someone, please do not put words in their mouth that they did not say. She never said any of that. What she said is that you're trying to do even more than what the government's doing. And the government has grown too out of control. And that's why we are where we are.
Okay, Ms. Brannies, do you want to respond? And if so, let me try to kind of thread this needle here. What is the role of government as far as things like public education, infrastructure? Use that as a prompt, eh?
you know, I think the role of government should be as limited as possible. Let us not forget who is the government. The government is simply we the people. So why we give the government so much more power than the tow truck driver or the waitress or the janitor is far beyond me, because y'all take their money just the same. Now, I don't say I'm against universal health care because I haven't experienced it. If anybody who thinks governmental ran healthcare is a fantastic idea, join the military. I did 6 years in the military, and I did Title 10 orders and Title 26 stateside and overseas orders. And I'll tell you, you don't want governmental ran healthcare. It's no secret the corrupt VA scandal that we had, that was right here. The heart of the scandal was right here in Phoenix, Arizona. So if you think it's a great idea, they promise you 5 years of free governmental ran healthcare with the yellow ribbon program as soon as your airplane lands back from war. How kind and beautiful for the television to see. But the problem is when you schedule an appointment, the thing that they never tell you is it takes 6 years to get that first appointment. 6 years to get that first appointment, Oscar. You can come with me anytime to the VA. A lot has changed since then. Praise God from the last administration. But if you think it's a great idea, join the military. They'll give you health care. You know, because there was a time just a few years ago, the government thought it was a great idea to give every soldier 5 shots of anthrax. On the second shot of anthrax, my arm got paralyzed. Yeah, and then a few years later, they want to try to offer us the shots they're trying to offer us now. No, thank you. Go get your government ran healthcare. No, thanks. I'll fend for myself. I'll
Okay.
take walks in the morning. I'll take care of my health.
Mr. Quinones, was that a hand going up there? Did you want to jump in here? Let's get
Yes.
everybody in.
Let's get everybody in. Thank you, Hank. I want to go back to what my Democratic colleague Oscar said. What I heard was him really illustrating the idea of the function of government and the reality that since our country's inception, the government has played a vital role in ensuring that the life of peoples improves. We were asked to provide at least one example. I think individuals that worked in the Great Deal through government-based programs that created infrastructure and brought new innovation would agree with that. I think individuals who take part in Social Security would agree with that. But we don't have to go back to the 1930s and 40s. We can look at the auto industry and the way that the government stepped in and adjusted greed in order to ensure that the auto care industry would thrive and continue to exist here. And then finally, when we look at these stimulus checks that were brought up, what's important to note is that those had to occur because the previous administration took such an opposed anti-scientific approach to a global pandemic that it made it impossible for people to actually go to work. And so I think it's important for all of us to understand that the government does have a vital role in improving people's lives and creating programs and systems that allow for an individual to thrive in this country.
Okay. Cool. Made it through one. Let's talk a little bit about housing prices very closely related to the economy. They have skyrocketed in Phoenix, in Arizona, in a state that was once known for its affordability. Is there something the legislature can do to help bring these costs back down? And if so, what's your plan? And I think we started with Ms. Pena last time. So Mr. Quinones, why don't you kick us off on this one?
Okay, thank you, Hank. I want to go back to some of the work that got taken, that was accomplished in this past session. One of the things that we were able to do that I was a part of was allocating $60 million to the Arizona Housing Trust Fund. Those dollars are going to go towards rental assistance, affordable housing, to support our individuals who are on the brink of being unsheltered. So I want to recognize some efforts that have already taken place. Additionally, and these are those difficult conversations that sometimes folks don't want to have, but we absolutely need to have. Arizona right now is at least over 100,000 units short, which means that we need to look at our zoning rules and our zoning laws, which means that there needs to be some strong collaboration between the state, cities, and towns to ensure that we are building as much as we need to build. We also need to look at creating some form of subsidies to developers who are going to build affordable housing. And then finally, there is some small light at the end of the tunnel. Yesterday, the Republic did report that rental prices in Arizona are on the way down. We need to continue. We need to continue on that path. But again, it's going to require a lot of collaboration. And then the last thing I'll do, we need to look at the mental health situation here in Arizona, because I also think that has to do with individuals who are facing being unsheltered. And so we need to look at a holistic approach to this situation.
Okay. Mr. De Los Santos?
Sure. The first thing I want to say is that housing should be a human right. I think that I know that we are living in the wealthiest society in the history of humanity, and it is utterly heartbreaking and I believe morally unacceptable for any human being to be unhoused in this country, in this city, in our community, particularly when a number of the people who are unhoused are veterans who have served this country, or are increasingly young people or children. So that is the first thing I think that we need to say. In terms of solutions, we have got to look at supply side solutions. I was speaking with several nonprofits and social service organizations who have developed a very innovative idea that they call co-location in order to construct more housing. And what that effectively means is that whenever we're building a fire station or a library or a new school, oftentimes that is being done on land that the government already owns. And what we can do is build housing on top of those structures to expand the number of housing units that are available for people. What that does is a sort of a twofold thing. One, it expands the number of units, and so you're getting potentially people off the streets, or you're providing different and new kinds of housing options for people. But second, because it is the public sector and nonprofits that are providing this housing, they can do so at rates that are below market. And when you do that, it puts pressure on private landlords who are disproportionately becoming corporate landlords, mega corporations that are leasing out housing. They need to bring their own prices down in order to compete with the nonprofit rate. So that's incredibly important. The last thing we need to talk about is that a big reason why we're seeing the cost of housing skyrocket is because private equity firms from Wall Street are buying up housing stock, buying it up, so shutting workers out, shutting the middle class out, making it hard for them, impossible for them, for us to purchase the home, and then renting it back to us at exorbitant rates. So I think we need to look into that. I think we need to crack down on it. I think that we need to make homeownership something that every single adult who works a full-time job can access. And that means cracking down on private equity firms and their greed and monopoly on the housing market.
Okay. Ms. Pena, weird zoning changes, subsidies for developers, co-location. What's the Republican solution?
So there's a number of solutions for this because it's a very, very multifaceted issue. I've talked to individuals that work in affordable housing and that they were attempting different affordable housing options here, even locally. And ultimately what caused them to decide, I'm not going to be in this business anymore was because it wasn't affordable to be in the affordable housing business. Why? One guess, the government. So there was always so much red tape. There was so many things. There's so many processes that they had to go through, and it made the projects run longer than they should have ever run. It made everything go way more expensive than they could possibly even imagine. And at the end of the day, you could see why here, especially in the South Side, you're not seeing affordable housing units be built. You're seeing these luxurious, brand new gated homes be built. No offense. I think they're beautiful. I love them too, but we're being priced out of the community. A lot of us are, especially the native Southsiders. We can't afford to live here. And I know there are people out there that are trying to bring affordable housing into the community, but because there's so much government bureaucracy, whether from the state, whether from the city, locally, it's been very difficult to make that happen. So that's what we need to look at. We need to look at all of these things that are taking place. We could say we're going to give subsidies. That's not bringing the price down. That's saying the government's going to pay for it, right? That's not solving it. Again, what do you do when you keep taking people's money and saying, we're going to use this to help someone else? And, I'm going to bring it back to the idea of greed, because I heard that word be used, greed. Okay, what is the difference between someone who is rich and wants to hold on to their money versus someone who wants to take someone else's money? Isn't that greed as well? At the end of the day, we need to be respectful of our property. I think myself, Marin, and the colleagues on the other side, we don't know. we read the Constitution, okay? We read it, we understand the Constitution. There's nowhere in the Constitution where it says that the government is supposed to buy this, buy that, pay for this, pay for that. It's none of that at all. It's supposed to protect your rights, your property, your freedoms. That's what the government's supposed to do. When you ask the government to take care of everything, every little solution, you actually give up all those rights and all those freedoms. And guess who benefits? It's actually the rich. It's the rich. Because again, who are the people that are building this housing that's too unaffordable? It's the rich. So let's look at this more, realistically. Okay. Now, I also am in favor of talking about taxes, rental property taxes. There's talks of taking that, bringing it down so that it can be more affordable for people to live. I agree we need to raise the supply, but we can't talk about raising the supply if we're not fixing the system to make the supply. We can't talk about that. We got to fix the system, because right now we want affordable housing, but we're making it very difficult for nonprofits and for the private sector to do it. We need to make it possible. We need to make it feasible. And you have to understand, both of my parents, they were school teachers. They raised 4 kids during a time here in Arizona that it was affordable. And guess what? It was conservatives, it was Republicans that were leading the state. It was affordable, okay? So please stop trying to say that the problems that we have here are because of Republicans. It's a lot more complicated than that. And I think we could look at, the beloved sister state, California, to see that if we follow those policies, which my buddies here, I think they're in favor of, we're going to end up more like them. And I can tell you, talking to everyone on every side of the aisle, they're not for that. I also want to let you know that I really do care about our situation with the unhoused. We need to help them out. I also understand that sometimes people choose that lifestyle. And so we need to figure out solutions to make sure that it's just unacceptable. You're not allowed to sleep outside and do whatever you want, because there are law-abiding citizens that don't feel safe in this community with the way things have been changing.
Okay. Ms. Brannies, affordable housing. Sorry, muted.
Perfect. Again, I'm going to say, get the government out of the way and see what's possible with a free thinking minds. See what's possible. Offer a project. I mean, shoot, even make it a college or a high school project. Say, hey, give us a plan for homelessness and we'll reward you this for the person who has the best return on investment for the people that they can impact for the same amount of money. And, we talk about, you guys just mentioned like that the Republicans are allowing free rides on tax credits and things like that, while simultaneously saying we need to give subsidies to the developers. What tax bracket is the developers in, I wonder? Far beyond mine as a rich food trucker. So, I think that we need to stop giving out subsidies to everybody. I think we need to see what's possible if we're not passing checks behind backs and rubbing backs, and see what's possible when nobody has a leg up and everybody has the same opportunity. And that's the Constitution and being a United States citizen. And that's it. That's all there is to it. My every answer is to get the government out of the way and see the magic that's possible with the people. And I think you guys are going to be blown away if you see what's possible when people work together and the government takes their foot off our neck. We can make some serious moves together. And I think that we can have far better resolution and keep a lot more money in the people's pockets. And if anybody else wants to go and give out free stuff, go do it. Go give out all your free stuff. Nobody cares. Go give it out. If you want to, have unhoused in your home, invite them in. You do you. But I don't think that's a governmental issue that we should be responsible for everybody's rights. Why is it a right? Do we even know what a right is anymore? I think we're confusing rights and laws and personal desires. A right is God-given, inalienable right. It can't be taken. It's not given to you by your representative. It's not given to you by your government. It's not on loan. My rights are God-given. You want to give up your rights? Go give them away. I gave up my rights multiple times over for this country. I gave up my rights when I served this country, and I said, no, thank you. I want them back. Then I thought I could help the community by being a foster parent. Then I found out to be a foster parent, you actually relinquish your constitutional rights because it's not a constitutional right to be a foster parent. So I got to see the real insides of how the government handles our children, how the government handles healthcare, how the government handles everything they've ever touched, education, you name it, inflation. Just give it to the government if you want it to be a disaster. Like, can we stop giving it to the government and can we start using our brains? I mean, that's it. Just give it back to the people.
Okay. Closely related to housing prices, Airbnbs. This is probably the number one question we get from voters, some version of what are you going to do about Airbnbs? So a little bit of background. State lawmakers a couple of years ago put serious restrictions on what cities are allowed to do regarding regulations for Airbnbs. This legislative session, lawmakers went back and eased some of that. I guess the way to phrase this question would be, should the state legislature be dictating to cities how they can and cannot regulate Airbnbs, short-term rentals? And we started with Mr. Quinones last time. Oscar, you want to kick us off?
Sure. I think on this issue, local leaders are probably best positioned to understand the needs of their community. And when it comes to this particular issue of Airbnbs, and I say that because you will have some situations in which there is indeed not a shortage of housing in that particular community or that particular jurisdiction. And so having Airbnbs there actually creates new economic activity. It may attract tourists, for example, and the like. There are other situations, however, where there are massive shortages of housing in that particular city or jurisdiction. And so having the city decide and the people who live there decide whether or not they want to regulate the use of Airbnbs probably makes more sense. And so, it's an issue that is very localized. And so for that reason, I think it's probably one that is best devolved to the local representatives and the people who live closest to the issue.
Okay. Let's stick with the House candidates just to make it a little bit easier on everybody. Ms. Peña, Airbnbs, short-term rentals.
I actually agree with Oscar on a lot on that. I think it's more of a local issue, the Airbnb situation. I mean, the state legislature is stepping in. I just don't really see why we would make the decisions, maybe some regulatory decisions, if there have to be some safety decisions, that might be a consideration. But I think at the end of the day, every local government needs to look into it. Personally, though, I don't have any problem with Airbnbs. From the economic standpoint, I think that it can boost up economies in certain areas. Having people coming from out of town, what do they tend to do? They rent an Airbnb, they got to go get their food, they got to go get their gas, they got to pay for everything that they don't have because they're not from the community. So if it boosts up the economy, I can't be against it. So that's just my 2 cents in it.
Wow, some bipartisan agreements.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Quinones?
Thank you, Hank. I'm going to continue to add to the bipartisan collaboration by saying that preemptive law, I'm in favor of local control. This past session, cities and towns voted me a friend of cities and towns because I believe in preemptive laws. I think that local government knows what's best. I think that the legislature should implement some guidelines to ensure that it is equitable, because we do get into situations where, based on population numbers, certain things should be handled in a certain manner. But I agree that cities and towns should be able to control their own Airbnb guidelines.
Okay, and our Senate candidate, Ms. Brannies? Sorry, I muted again. Happens every time.
Deja vu. I agree, as local as possible, and I would even take it even more local than that to the individual community and the individual neighbors. I think that there should be a respect for the individual, neighbors that are directly involved, not necessarily people who are streets away having an input over there. So again, I think less government, and they should just be neighborly and have the conversation there.
Wow, I should have saved that question for last. We could have gone out on a real high note, everyone agreeing. Okay, let's move on from some of the economic questions to Roe versus Wade, abortion access. So the Dobbs decision overturned the Roe versus Wade precedent on abortion access, essentially handing over the decision of how available, if at all, abortion procedures should be to state legislatures. So whoever of you are elected are going to have a huge say over women's reproductive rights. So I want to ask this question differently to the Democrats and the Republicans. Let's start with the Republicans. And I want to ask you, in what situation, if any, do you believe abortion should be legal? And Ms. Brandes, why don't you kick us off?
I overall, I personally, I don't agree with it as a whole. I do agree with the decision of it being returned back to the state where it should have always belonged in the first place. However, I do agree with it for certain instances. I do have friends that have had personal experiences when it comes to health of the mother, incest, as well as rape. However, that is less than 3% of the total abortions. So let's please not forget that, because there's been more than 60 million abortions since that ruling. So I do agree in those three instances, which is less than 3%, but I do agree with turning it back to the state. And I do agree with representing the people, as far as the people of Arizona have repeatedly spoken, and they said 15 weeks. Personally, I think that's too much. However, I think that that is a fair place to meet everybody and be very reasonable.
Okay, let me grill you on this. So would you vote for a 15-week law?
I would, for 15 weeks, because that's what the people of Arizona have desired, and it is a state issue. And so if that's what the people desire, then again, despite my personal desires, then that's what I would honor as a state representative, because I am a representative of the people, not myself.
Okay. Ms. Pena, same question. Where do you draw the line, essentially?
So I really appreciate this question, because I am actually a mother. I'm a woman, a real woman. I know sometimes that's a question that people can't answer on the other side nowadays. I have 4 daughters currently, and everything about women matters to me. And this is one of those issues that I have dug in very deeply, very, very deeply, probably more than anyone on the panel. No offense, but I've spent so much time studying this issue in and out from both sides. Years ago, I was pro-life light, which was like, oh yeah, there are holy instances where you need abortion. The more and more I research it, the more and more I see how atrocious it is. Why? Because we fail as a society to tell women the truth about abortion. We fail in society to tell women that within a year of having gone through an abortion, women have suffered so much depression. A lot of times they start using substances, they have substance abuse issues, alcohol abuse issues, suicidal tendencies, and sometimes they do actually take their lives. And a lot of times women regret it to the point that they try to get pregnant once again. It's an empty hole that they can't fill. And sometimes women, they are in denial for it for a long time. And sometimes it takes 10 years, sometimes it takes 40 years for them to figure out what it was that has been bothering them because 9 months to carry a child versus a whole lifetime to carry that burden. So this is something I've looked at very, very deeply to see the amount of hurt that we are putting on women because of this so-called reproductive health care. I have plenty of friends that have gone through these situations where their life was on the line. And because I actually know how abortion looks like in every single trimester, I've seen the doctors never used abortion. In fact, if they did use abortion, I think my friends would be dead. So I believe that we need to do everything possible to preserve the mother's life. But I don't think that in order to preserve the mother's life, you have to take the life of a child. I think there are ways that you can try to preserve the mother's life and save that child. Another thing that really bugs me about this whole argument, and I know that they're paying millions and millions of dollars on the radio, on the TV, everywhere to tell you about abortion and how wonderful it is. And they're lying about all these things about what pro-lifers are about. And just so you know, we do want to save the lives of the mothers, and we do want to help people. We want to make sure that no matter what the situation is, that there is support there for the mothers, support for the babies, support for the fathers, support for the families. Because if you really care about life, you're going to do that. And talking about basic human rights, this is the ultimate basic human right, the right to live. Who decides who is a human being and who is not? I'm afraid, well, I'm going to say it. The Democrats are anti-science. They don't believe that someone who has their own blood type, their own chromosomes, their own DNA are a human being of their own. They're anti-science. What is the difference between that child being in the womb and if you were to see that child in a dumpster crying for help? Anyone in the world would know that it is our responsibility to take care of that innocent human being when it's out there in the world. But because it's in the womb and you can't see it, and because someone doesn't want to keep it, that child has no rights. The only time that child has rights is when someone desires it. I disagree with that. I really disagree with that. I also disagree with harming women. I have known women who have been raped. I know women who have gone through incest situations. And Marin, I am going to correct you. It's actually less than 1%, by the way. It's less than 1%. It's not less than 3%. It's less than 1%. So they want to use, the Democrats want to use these little tiny instances to instead say abortion for all, no limitations. I can tell you that the Democrats in the state of Arizona have voted in favor of infanticide. So that's saying that a third trimester baby, that's a preemie baby, that survives an abortion, that's not a human being either. And let that baby die. That baby has no rights. Therefore, late-term abortions, that's atrocious too. Do you know what a late-term abortion looks like? They poison the child in the womb and they let it die. Then they force the woman to go into labor. That's a 2 to 3 day process. How does that save a woman's life? It doesn't save a woman's life. That's not healthcare. Okay? That's just the third trimester. We can talk about this all day. And if you guys want to talk about it all day, I will. But I want to let you know that I'm about human rights. And I look forward to the day in the future when we look back and we're like, you guys really had that? Yeah. We used to abort millions upon millions upon millions of children. And there were more Black babies aborted than born every year.
I want to make sure we're clear for the voters here, though. It sounded to me like you were saying no to cases of rape and incest, but yes to save the life of a mother. Did I understand that correctly?
I definitely think we need to, well, and the thing is, again, abortion isn't necessarily what saves the life of a mother. So I don't think that's a proper term for it. It's actually emergency surgery. And as far as with rape and incest, that's something we have to look into, because you also have to look at, the terms, like the gestation of the child. If you're saying, hey, I was raped and your baby is due tomorrow, I'm sorry, but you had a long time to figure that out. And at the end of the day, I have to see the human in that child. I have friends who were babies that came from incest. I have friends who were babies that came from rape. I actually have a friend that she chose life for her child, even though it was a rape situation. And I see that baby, she's getting an adopted family. I see that baby, I see a human being. I cannot deny that. So for someone to try to shame me and say, no. I am looking at the whole situation. Do you want 9 months to carry a child and care for it? Or do you want a lifetime of carrying the burdens of abortion? And that's what I want to make sure we protect women. And it's not just women that suffer, men suffer, families suffer. And we hide that because it's a multi-million-dollar industry that makes all this money off of this.
Okay, I'm not sure I got an exact answer, but it's close enough. Democrats, I want to ask this question differently for you guys. What restrictions on abortion, if any, do you believe could be justified? Is there any point at which we should not allow abortions? And Mr. Quinones?
Thank you, Hank. I'm going to be very clear and very direct on this question. I believe that the decision to have an abortion is best between a person, a woman, their doctor, their physician, and their family, bar none, period. I don't think there should be any government interference in making that decision and on that action. Those decisions are personal, and every single time that the government interferes in it, it creates confusion, and it also creates trauma because it goes on to shame individuals. The reality is abortions happen for a number of reasons. And what our friends on the other side like to do or like to paint is that everybody just wants to have an abortion. That's not the reality. And so bar none, I firmly believe, I'm firmly pro-choice that a woman can make those decisions on their own in consultation with their doctor, their families, and that decision should be absolutely made by themselves. There should be no government interference.
Okay. Mr. De Los Santos?
I agree with Representative Quinones. I believe that the decision to have this medical procedure, which is sometimes life-saving and always important and weighty, should be left up to a patient and their medical provider, full stop, period. This is an incredibly complex issue that we need to approach with compassion, understanding, medical knowledge and science. And frankly, the politicians at the Capitol do not hold the qualifications to make those kinds of medical judgments. So that is what I would say.
If I can add something real quick.
Jump right in.
I just find it kind of comical that, you know, this is actually what the Constitution asks us to do, is to protect life. And I just heard that the government needs to stay out of this. It's like, wait, what? But that's the purpose of the government. We're supposed to protect life. Now, the difference is, I believe in science. I believe in the medical advancements that we've had in the 50 years since Roe. I believe in the technological advancements since the 50 years versus Roe. Obviously, as you can see, the other side, they are still saying the same things that have been said for 50 years, and it's time to move on from that, quite frankly, because you know, not all medical professionals agree. Not all. I wish you guys would get rid of that talking point, because I've talked to plenty who had a different opinion on that. And so if it comes to a woman, her doctor, and the decision they make, you know, I have a friend that she was expecting her 5th baby. Okay. She had 4 girls and she finally was pregnant with a boy. And this baby had club feet, and they could see it in the ultrasound. You know, her doctor told her, you can abort him. Just because he had a small defect with his feet. She did not abort him. She gave life to him. I know this boy. He's a beautiful baby boy. And she confided in me, and she told me what the doctor said. He's gone through some medical procedures. He now can walk normal. But I'm sitting here thinking, this doctor made his life worthless because his feet had a small defect. That's the sort of thing that we're facing. We're facing doctors that are telling people that you can abort because this life is not as worth it. And I'm sorry, I've read enough of, like, you know, I've studied a lot of World War II, the Holocaust. This feels too much like that when we're deciding your life is valuable, but your life isn't valuable. Oh, you've got problems as a you know, a little unborn child. You have defects. You know, in Europe, I think it's in Iceland. Children with Down syndrome, it's a death sentence. They don't want them born. And I will always defend these innocent individuals, because guess what? If you put an ultrasound on them during the abortion, you can see them fighting and screaming in the womb. If you were to see a deaf person in front of you screaming and fighting because someone is attacking them, you would go defend them, wouldn't you? But because they're in the womb, they're silenced. So I'll just leave it at that.
I think I saw both of the Democrats' hands go up. You both want to talk? One of you want to field this one? Jump right in there.
Thank you, Hank. I'll go back to what my colleague, my Democrat colleague, Mr. De Los Santos said. Look, full stop, this decision should be made by the individual and their doctor. And what the other side tries to do is they try to conjure up some really emotional and drastic examples of when this happens. Ultimately, the reality is this: the legislators are not in those doctors' office having those conversations. As a result, we should not interfere with that decision. We should trust the individual to make the decision that is best for themselves and for their families, period.
Let me see, Oscar, did you want to speak first?
I did. And I think what we're hearing from the Republican side is an advocating for forced birth laws, much like what the 1864 law that recently went into effect and is currently being litigated is. And what that law says is that the government will force people, whether it's a young girl who's been raped, a woman who's in a domestic violence situation, to give birth. And in other instances, the law would force somebody, a woman who's pregnant, to give birth to a child with serious and deadly abnormalities. And so what you're doing is forcing the pregnant person to give birth to a child that will be dead within minutes or hours. That is torture. And by Ms. Pena's own account, if we take even what she said for granted as true, there's conflicting medical advice. And even if you were to take that to be true, then the doctor who is closest to the patient and the patient need to be making that decision, not some politician who, again, is utterly untrained and utterly unqualified in medicine. Frankly speaking, reading Yahoo articles and comments does not qualify you to make these kinds of very weighty and very serious medical decisions.
I just like to add that he said that we're pregnant persons. We're not mothers anymore or women. We're pregnant persons.
Ms. Brannies?
Okay, I got a couple of questions. All right, so are we fighting for universal governmental ran healthcare, or are we fighting for the government to get out of the conversation between the pregnant woman and her doctor? Like, you can't have both. Like, it seems like you guys want the government when it comes to the pocketbook, but you don't want the government when it comes to making rules for the pocketbook. The boys want daddy's money, but not daddy's rules. The girls want to earn their own money and not worry about daddy's money or rules. Wow, how the tables have turned over all these years. Like, let's get back to just, again, the regular people just being self-sufficient. Like, do you want the government in your healthcare? Do you not want the government in your healthcare? You can't have both. And also answer the question as far as what is the time frame? I gave a time frame. Say it for the people. Be crystal clear about what you're okay with. What is a life to you guys? Say it clearly, please.
All right, I think that was relatively clear. No restrictions on any abortion. If anyone wants to respond, otherwise we can move on to education, water.
Just to clarify, any age, the boys are okay with abortion for any age? Just to clarify, I need clarification. And I think the voters do too.
And, I'll add, you could check out the voting record for the Democrats here in Arizona. They all vote in lockstep. They're not really for the poor, because guess what? Planned Parenthood and the abortion industry makes a ton of money, tons of money. So of course they're going to be helping, just like they want to help the rich housing developers. They don't want to limit the government in certain things that they should be limited. They want to help, the rich continue getting rich. But you can visit vamosaz.com /issues. Right there, you can see the infanticide. That means a baby that survives an abortion. All the Democrats voted against protecting that baby in Arizona because they are not a human, okay? You can also see the late-term abortion. Marcelino was in favor of the late-term abortion. And you can see his record there that he voted in favor of that. Again, it's www.vamosaz.com /issues. We want people to know the truth of what's happening.
Hank, this is becoming a much more complicated answer, for the voters. The reality is this: as voters, do we want the government in the medical office? And to again echo what my Democrat colleague Oscar is saying, we are not equipped. We are not medical doctors who should be making those decisions on behalf of the individuals who are in the medical offices. I trust women, I trust individuals to make the best healthcare decisions for themselves.
Then I bring up the question, Marcelino, if that's the case, then why were you guys forcing people to get these COVID shots? If that's the case, why were you forcing people to take a vaccine, a so-called vaccine, now we know it's more of a shot, that was not tested and proven yet? Whether someone took it or not, that's not the issue. What I saw is that the government was forcing it on people. And I see that you guys were perfectly fine with that. I'm not fine with that, just so people know. I'm also not fine with the government completely limiting and closing businesses, because the way that they did that, and especially here locally, we suffered immensely because of that. But you could drive over to Queen Creek and they were open and they were doing fine. They had life and their economies are doing well and their kids were learning while we were suffering here. So just want to add that.
Next question's all about COVID. Okay. Let me phrase it this way. What did the Arizona government get right and wrong about its handling of COVID-19 over the last 2 and change years? And I've forgotten who we went with last. So Ms. Brannies, you want to kick us off? An example of something the government did right and what was the biggest mistake?
I think one of the biggest mistakes was trying to make decisions for the individual people and then breaking it down all the way to different decisions per school district. I mean, if we're following science, does each school district have their own scientists? Because I'm a referee for Arizona Interscholastic Association. That's an Arizona reffing organization. So how come I could not ref in the poor areas, but the wealthy areas, COVID can't get you over there. Just south of the 10, it's prevalent. So one thing that I think they did wrong was, if this was a global pandemic, then make a global decision, make a state decision then for us, like as a whole, every single school, the exact same, regardless of socioeconomic or status or anything else for that matter. And what I think they did well was get in the way of the American people. They fired them up. They poked the bear. They got me here. If they would have left me alone, making popcorn, refereeing, following my own personal pursuit of happiness, fostering children, living my best life, I wouldn't be here right now. But the government wanted to get in my life. And so now here we are. Like I said, I'd much rather be selling popcorn. People are way happier. I make a lot more money than politics and have a lot less drama. But so I think that's one thing that they did well, was wake up the spirit of the true American and saying enough is enough. We're done with you guys in our lives. We're done with you guys making decisions for us. The government can't fight themselves out of a wet paper bag, let alone make any decisions for me. I agree with the other candidates on that. Yeah, the government's not scientists. The government's not medical doctors and shouldn't be in the way. They shouldn't be in the way of anything, because the government's not anything but a bunch of collective people that are making decisions for other people, but they're making, rules for thee, but not for me. And then we add all these fees and permitting and regulations and bureaucracies and all this, middleman stuff. Oh boy, you guys, we got a mess we got to clean up here in America and Arizona and down to our local district. Boy, do we ever. And like, I'm ready. Whatever we got to do, let's do it. Abraham Lincoln, when he got in, he hired the 3 people running against him. Like, if we're all here to put our necks out there to do what's right for the community, then let's do what's right for the community. Let's just do it.
Okay, Ms. Pena, give us something Arizona nailed through the pandemic and something it screwed up.
Okay, real quick, I do want to make something clear because Oscar did take a swipe at me saying that I, read Yahoo articles to get my facts on abortion. No, it's called Talking to Ex-Abortionists and Ex-Abortion Workers, including one that sued Planned Parenthood and won here, and then talking to plenty of people who have been through that. So no, that's not at all the case. And I want to invite people here in Arizona, in our district, off of 24th Street in Baseline. We're going to have finally a full functioning pregnancy resource center, Aid to Women. It's going to be there to help women and families through the whole process. So something that worth celebrating. And I've helped them come here to the community. Okay, back to COVID. So, I'm proud of the fact that Arizona didn't go full blown crazy like other states. We were for the most part open. In our district, I was really disappointed though because we didn't see that really happening here. You saw it happening everywhere else, like Maren was saying, they were able to play sports in some other areas. And just because of, our wealth, that shouldn't be the case. But what I saw was our elected officials were pushing it here. And that was really disappointing because if you really care about the most vulnerable people, which we have in our community here. We have a lot of low income families. We have a lot of families that both parents are working. We have a lot of children that are falling behind, and they are probably some of the lowest in the states, not all of them, but there are some here. And we were closing the schools, we were closing the parks, we were closing franchises, we were hurting small businesses. That was more coming for locally. And then there was also a lot of fear mongering going on. But then if you went to the East Valley or other parts of the Valley, it was like normal. Everyone took health precautions, the necessary health precautions. If you're sick, you stay home, and you make sure you stayed home for the 14 days or however long, and you took care of yourself. You were responsible. But over here, it's like everything was so controlled and so limited to the point that we saw businesses suffering. We saw mental health decline. We saw crime rise. We saw more young teens get involved in gangs and drive-by shootings. And what's really disappointing is I heard nothing of these concerns from any of our elected Democrats, not a peep. They were not scared of that. They were more scared of going and serving the legislature because of COVID, but they could go out and protest in the streets, no problem. So that's what I saw was going on. I'll say another thing too. What's really sad is they weren't following the actual science. They were punishing children and closing the schools. And believe it or not, there are actually private schools here in South Phoenix that were open during the pandemic. So those kids were getting great education. And it didn't mean all the families had to go in person. They had options for, doing it online as well. But the kids in the public school, because the unions, sad to say, the unions were forcing this, unscientific things. They weren't listening to the national experts or even the worldwide experts saying that COVID was not really severe with children, or you weren't really going to be catching it from children so much. They ignored that. And so they closed the schools. Now we see that the Empowerment Scholarship Account, the ESA, has passed. And that means that any child can go to whatever school it is. So if there's ever a threat of this happening again, the parents have choices. They can do it. They can have the money, follow their child, and they can do it. And I'm the only one running for state representative that supports the Empowerment Scholarship Account. Oscar and Marcelino do not. And Marcelino voted against it in the state legislature.
Okay, I think that was more than one thing the state did wrong, but we'll let it slide. Marcelino, what did the state do right? What did the state do wrong?
This is what the state did right during the global pandemic. One was the unemployment benefits for individuals who were forced out of a job because of a global pandemic. The other thing that they did is they instituted the rental moratorium so that individuals would not be unhoused during that crisis. And then the last thing that the government did right, the Ducey administration did right during the global pandemic, was the vaccine handling of COVID-19. Here's what it didn't do right, which I think is important to note. The reality is that COVID-19 began in 2020. The previous administration was at the helm, and their largest concern was to show a small number of individuals who had been impacted, because the previous administration was afraid of their handling of the pandemic. So what they did is they created confusion. They created confusion at every single aspect. From the beginning, the scientists, the expert told us that this was unlike anything we had ever seen. And so we needed to have extra precautions. We needed to be thoughtful. And the previous administration was intent on creating confusion about everything, even as simple as a mask, whether you should wear it or not. They literally turned the mask into a debate that now defines people instead of following the science. I thought that when the mayor of Phoenix, the mayor of Tucson, and the mayor of Flagstaff instituted executive orders so that businesses needed to be closed, the governor stepping in there and then adding to the confusion just created these cultural wars that shouldn't have happened if we had followed the science from the beginning. In regards to schools being closed or not, it's because our public schools care about our students, and because we were not in a position to handle the infection crisis, those needed to be closed. So they took care of people to some extent, but overall, I think following the guidelines and the path of the previous administration is the greatest mistake that we did here in Arizona.
Okay. And Mr. De Los Santos.
The COVID-19 crisis was an unprecedented pandemic that was, it should not be thought of as an abstraction. It was a tragedy for millions of families across this country, including here in Arizona. 1 in 200 Arizonans died, including hundreds of people in our district. Perhaps if you're watching tonight, you had a family member who died or a friend who passed away, and my heart goes out to you. And so I think that the worst thing that was done was the cynical politicization of what should have been a steady, even-handed response grounded in medicine, grounded in public health guidelines, and grounded in science. And the fact is that there was no perfect response. Nobody had dealt with this before. And so there were mistakes that were going to be made. But it is, I think, unforgivable to intentionally mislead the public or intentionally sow doubt in well-established scientific facts to score political points. On the plus side, I think the government having expanded Medicaid to about 500,000 Arizonans was a terrific decision. And I think that people should have healthcare all the time, not just during COVID. And I also think that our superintendent of public instruction, Kathy Hoffman, did a good job. She quickly moved to ensure that children in rural communities, poor children in urban communities, and children who live on tribal lands had access to the technology they needed to stay connected during a time when many activities were not in person. And so I think that was a real plus.
All right. We're running low on time here, but I want to get to a couple more questions before we move on to closing statements. We haven't talked a lot about education other than tangentially yet. So I think a simple, straight to the point question here is Arizona's K-12 public education system overfunded, underfunded, or just right? And if you say over or under, tell us by how much. And I think we're starting off with Ms. Pena this time.
Sorry, I muted myself. Okay. As far as the funding goes, half of the state budget goes to education. So that's a considerable amount. This is the issue that I see. And I have the background in public education. I actually was a public school teacher, and I was raised by two public school teachers who taught for Roosevelt. I also taught for Roosevelt. This is what I've been seeing. That money comes from the state. It gets to the district. It never gets to the teacher. It never gets to the classroom. I have seen too many examples where the district can afford to do certain things that other districts can't do, and but they can't raise the pay for the teachers. And that's something I take very personally, because having been raised by two teachers and knowing that Arizonans this entire time always voted in favor of raising teacher pay, they always voted in favor of that. And we didn't see it. We really didn't see it. But you could see that the district officials were doing great.
So is the state spending too much on public education?
I think I don't think we're spending too much. I think what we need to do is we need to make sure that money gets to where it needs to be. So if that means that we have to either find better auditing solutions or stricten, how that money is being spent once it gets to the district, I want to find solutions to make sure that money's getting where it belongs. Because here's another thing that people just don't even know, okay? Especially since my colleagues are against the Empowerment Scholarship Account. The Empowerment Scholarship Account is about $7,000 a year per child, right? So if you're going to go with a private option, that's $7,000 that you're limited to. Did you know that public school funding is about like $11,000 a year? $11,000 a year per kid. And they still don't have sufficient funds. I don't know how these private schools do it, with the tuition being so low as it is. But the public schools, they get tons and tons of money. You have to remember, you have the federal, you have the state, you have local, and they get all this money, but the money's not getting where it should be. I'm all for making sure our teachers get properly paid, but if we're going to keep trying to move the budget to the state, we're going to be taking the budget from other necessities that we have within the state. So we have to remember there's a lot of public employees that we don't want to take their money either. So we have to be really smart about it. I want to figure out the problem that we have with our funding. I want to make sure that we get that money directly to the teachers, to the classrooms, to the kids, and help make this education better. And I think because we have now expanded empowerment scholarship accounts for all kids in Arizona, you're going to see more competition. You're going to see these schools make some changes, because they have to, if they want to make sure they have children coming to their schools. So I support great public schools, and I know we do have some surrounding wonderful public schools here locally.
Let me just try to get a little clarification here. Would you vote to increase or cut education funding as a lawmaker?
I would never decrease, for sure.
Okay.
I would never decrease. I don't think that's the right thing to do.
Not saying never to an increase, though.
Again, we have seen this be done over and over again. And if all it does is fatten administrators' pockets, then I have failed to help the teachers and the resources that the kids need. I don't want that. I want to make sure it gets to the teachers and to the kids.
Fair enough. Mr. Quinones?
Thank you, Hank.
If underfunded, by how much? Give us a number, will you?
Yes, sir. I'm going to be really succinct with this. I would add another $500 million to the educational budget. These $500 million would go to spread out so that we could retain our teachers and increase their pay. Additionally, I would hire other support staff for our schools. I think we are in desperate need of high school of counselors, excuse me. I'm really proud of the fact that in this session, I introduced HB 2667, which would bring counselors to the schools. We talk about the mental health crisis that our students are experiencing. I think we need other individuals to support the education of our students in addition to our teachers. I think we need support staff in our classrooms. I want to touch really briefly on the vouchers and the expansion of these dollars. Yes, I did vote against that. And I'll tell you why I voted against that, because a story came out a week ago a month ago that there's been 8,100 families who have applied for these vouchers, these $7,000. 8,100 families. Out of those 8,000 families, guess what? 78% of those families did not have a student go into public school. And so what continues to happen is that our public schools continue to get attacked because they're called failing schools, and they're saying that our teachers are not doing enough. The reality is we're not doing enough, and we need to advocate and ensure that the resources are being provided without stripping public schools of the dollars.
And since you were so kind to give us a hard number, where does that money come from? Let me grill you on this. Increased taxing, or we have money in our budget that we, and we have a surplus in our budget, but that is not an ongoing surplus. So we'd have to cut something from the budget, or we'd have to raise taxes. Where's that 500 billion come from?
Yes, my colleague, Mr. De Los Santos mentioned earlier, we need to look at our tax system. And if there are individuals who are at over, hundreds of thousands of dollars per year, they can afford their fair share to contribute back into the state. That's the reality.
Okay. Mr. De Los Santos, how much?
We are vastly underfunded. We rank near the bottom in per pupil funding. And I think we have got to, in the next 5 years, at least come up to the average. And then 5 years after that, or 10 years after that, we should be #1 in per pupil funding in the state. Every single child deserves an incredible school and a world-class education, and we should be making that happen. That should be our #1 priority as state lawmakers. On the question of vouchers, I agree, we need accountability. And the problem with vouchers is that there's zero accountability. What happens is that you've got these vouchers that are currently, as Representative Quinones said, going disproportionately to the top earners, the richest of the rich, and they're using them to fund fancy private schools. Your taxpayer monies are being taken out of your local traditional public school and being given to a private school, oftentimes a religious school. But more than that, what this creates is that it turns in our public education system from a public good, something that we all benefit from and we all pay into, a public good, into a private business. What you're going to see are charlatans taking over and taking advantage of this situation. There will pop up sham schools that promise you the moon, hire utterly unqualified teachers, take your money, pocket it, and don't teach your kid a thing. And oftentimes these schools are going to be religiously indoctrinating your children into very strange ideas, coming home, telling their mother that they shouldn't be wearing certain things, or all kinds of strange ideas that I don't think our public money should be funding. So I oppose it on that ground. But look, we have got a massive teacher shortage in this state. There are over 1,000 classrooms that do not have a fully certified, highly qualified teacher. And part of that is because we have some of the worst paid teachers. So we have got to pay our teachers more. We've got to pay our education professionals more. Our budget says our values. Right now, our budget is giving money away and away and away, shoving money into the mouths of the riches and the mega corporations. That shouldn't be our priority. That's the priority of lobbyists and politicians and the Republican legislature that has been in power for decade after decade. That is not the priority of working Arizonans. That is not the priority of the majority of the people.
Okay, and our Senate candidate? You're muted.
Would you please repeat the question?
Yeah, essentially, are we spending too much money on education, too little money on education, or just the right amount of money? And if it's too much or too little, be specific. Where are we going to cut that money from? How much? And where are we going to get that money from? How much?
Okay. I think just the fact that it's a question brings to light that it's a problem, and we're all fully aware of that. But to say how much specifically to cut or to add without getting into the actual specifics of it would be negligent at best. And so I would like to take a look at it, and I would like to cut as much as we possibly can while simultaneously offering as much as we possibly can. And if that's with taking it away from the private sector and giving it from the public sector and giving it to the private sector and or the religious schools, well, then if that is that parent's choice, well, then what business do you have being involved in it? That parent is a taxpayer. That parent has a child to look out for the best interest of their child and their future, not you, Oscar. So I think we should take a look at it and we should cut as much as we possibly can. I think that the people are speaking loud and clear with their money and with their vote. They voted for the CSA funding and they voted to move with the funds to where they feel is going to be best for their children. Because all the schools that got the most amount of funding, that had the most amount of restrictions and closure during COVID, at the end of COVID, they produced the most stellar of football stadiums. But when you go over there, 15-year-olds don't know how to sign their name when buying lunch. They ask if they can print it. Mind you, they simultaneously will say this, that, can I print my name? I don't know how to sign it, while simultaneously having a rainbow pin on and a rainbow bracelet. And I think to myself, how bizarre. At 15, I literally didn't even know what gay was. And here I am, kids literally don't even know how to sign their own names at 15, but are fully aware of multiple sexual deviances. To the point where I go to referee at a high school and there's cat litter boxes in the bathrooms. And I think, why? That's weird. Does somebody have a pet cat? Is there like a pet cat in the classroom? Nope. They're being all inclusive to furries. I had to ask what that was. This is going on right here in the state of Arizona, and the parents are unaware. So when I see things like cat litter and I think to myself, that's being funded somewhere, somehow, yeah, we got room to cut, guys. We got a lot of room to cut, for that matter. We're buying cat litter for not having any cats.
I had a feeling a hand would go up there.
Meow, let's fix the problem.
Bypassing the cat litter issue for a second, we were talking about choice of schools. 90% of Arizona families choose traditional or choose public schools. And I think that
was public schools where cat litter was?
That was a loud and clear statement that people like their public schools. And I think as lawmakers, we have a responsibility to make sure that they are properly funded and are excellent schools for our children.
I think Ms. Pena had her hand up next, and then we'll go.
I just have to say, I have to clear a lot of things that Oscar said, because a lot of stuff he's saying is like, he really has no idea what he's talking about when it comes to empowerment scholarship account.
But try to do it quickly, please.
Okay, so first of all, there's lots of families in this district. So if you know anything about, raising kids and having children in school here, there's a lot of families here that did not qualify for the empowerment scholarship account until it got expanded. And yes, 90%, if that's the right number, 90% of Arizona families pick public school, then it's not a threat to the public schools that we have the empowerment scholarship accounts. There aren't enough private schools to take away all of the students from the public schools. What we want to see great public schools. And as far as the indoctrination of kids in private schools, is there not an indoctrination in the public schools? Because if a family wants to send their kid to a school, a private school, they chose it. Why are people picking private schools in the first place anyways? It's because they're good. So please stop insulting parents who know best, and they want to send their kids to a school that teaches them. Private schools will not survive if they fail. But what do we see here in our own district? We have failing public schools that they've been surviving for decades. Okay, they've been surviving for such a long time. So we need to be honest about these situations. We want to make our public schools better. We applaud the great public schools out there. Families that want to homeschool their kids, families that want to send their kids to private school, that want to do micro school or do something that helps their children more effectively. Let them have that choice. That's what the Empowerment Scholarship Account is. And I wanted to make a quick correction. I did misspeak. It isn't 11,000, it's 14,000 per student per year in the public system. So.
Okay.
Hank, I know we're short on time, so I'll make it really quickly. 3 quick points. First one, my colleague, Mr. De Los Santos, knows exactly what he's talking about, these voucher expansions. 90% of them voted yes. Now, let's look at that. When was this bill passed? It was passed at the 11th hour. It was passed as a striker, meaning it passed along party lines. When we talk about really representing people and honoring their wishes and their well-being, why does that bill have to pass at the 11th hour? Because the reality is that's the last thing they had to do, and it passed along party lines. What's happened to all of these efforts from teachers to bring these ballot measures? Governor Ducey's stacked court has time and again cut those efforts to ensure that vouchers don't get expanded. And then the last thing I'll say is it's in the numbers, folks. We can argue day and night about the numbers, but as of a month ago, 8,100 families have applied for these vouchers. 78% of them are not sending their children to public schools to begin with. So these vouchers are only adding more dollars to the rich. That's the choice here. Do we want to continue to add dollars to the wealthy, to the ones that already have, or do we want to adequately fund and support our public schools?
I think it's an insult to the community that you are openly advocating against the expansion to Empowerment Scholarship Accounts, because I can tell you, I work with families here in the community on a regular basis. I want everyone to have access to the best education, whether it be public or private. And for you guys to be advocating against it, it's really sad. It's a slap in the face to our voters, quite frankly.
All right, I want to do one lightning round, then we'll go to closing questions. Raise your hand if you believe that Arizona's elections are safe, secure, accurate, and that Joe Biden won the 2020 election in Arizona fair and square. Okay, closing statements. Let's start in reverse order. Mr. De Los Santos, kick us off.
Terrific. I will be brief. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. This evening, you heard a lot. You heard about cat litter boxes, defunding public education. You heard wild conspiracy theories regarding anthrax. And you heard 2 candidates deny that Joe Biden is the duly elected president of the United States of America. You also heard lip service about fighting for working families, despite the fact that the Republican-led legislature, which has been in power for over 50 years, has never done that. We are here to change things. It is time for a big, big change. Fresh, bold, new, and progressive leadership. My name is Oscar De Los Santos. I'm a former public school teacher. I'm a Rhodes Scholar, and I am endorsed by the working people of our community: nurses, teachers, construction workers, iron workers, plumbers, and pipe fitters. The people who build our schools and build our community are backing this campaign because they know we are the only ones who are serious about fighting for working families and middle-class families in this state. I hope to earn your support. Thank you so much for tuning in.
All right, thank you. Mr. Quinones.
Thank you, Hank. District 11 voters, thank you so much for taking part in this debate, listening to the candidates. You heard an array of things. You heard from 2 individuals who are aware of the issues and are living in reality. And then you saw hands raised up contesting the secure and accurate results of the 2020 election. Please keep that in mind. If you vote opposite of those individuals, they're going to fight you on your vote. We simply cannot afford to do that with democracy. We have to go forward and we have to respect the will of the voters. Joe Biden won the presidency fair and square. And unless somebody can say that, that means they're not going to honor your vote. The other thing that's really important here is that, do you want legislators to make decisions about reproductive rights and abortion and to actually make decisions when they're not in the doctor's office? And then public education. We need to continue to support our teachers, our students, so that we can move towards the future. I know this because I'm a product of public schools. I know this because I've served on the Roosevelt School District Governing Board. I know all of this because I grew up right in South Phoenix. It has been an honor to have been appointed as your representative. Look forward to the opportunity and the privilege of returning. And so I ask for you to vote for Marcelino Quinones and Democrats up and down the ballot so that we can move our state forward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Ms. Peña, final thoughts?
Yes. First of all, I'd like to say that that last question had multiple questions in there. Joe Biden is the president. Now you're asking if they're fair, safe, and elections. That's a questionable thing. And I would actually like to quote some Democrats from the 2000. I'm going to quote Senator Kamala Harris, who said in 2018, we brought in folks who before our eyes hacked election machines. Those are being used in many states, but are not state of the art from our perspective. She was quoted saying things. Amy Klobuchar was quoted saying things. Senator Ron Wyden was also quoted saying things. There have been plenty and plenty cases of that. And, the fact that we want to make sure that our elections, people feel confident about that, I'm for that. Now, Joe Biden is the president. Obviously, we see how horrible things are. Thanks, you guys. Thanks for doing that to us. As you can see, Mary and I, we don't like that and we want to fix it. Now, as far as the issues go, you heard this hour that we are no longer women. We are no longer mothers. We're pregnant people. You heard the truth. There are actually kitty litter boxes. It's not the first time I've heard that. I've heard that from mothers in public schools and Oscar mocking it. That's not a conspiracy theory. That's a reality. We actually have schools. Kathy Hoffman from the Superintendent of Public Instruction, which, sadly, Oscar thinks is amazing. She's trying to sexualize kids. She's trying to sexualize the kids, and the whole Democrat Party is trying to do it too. You know how you can find that out? If you check out vamosaz.com/issues, you could see that the Democrats voted against protecting children in Arizona from having their genitals mutilated. They think it's okay for young children to go through gender reassignment surgery. I think that's abusive. I think that is deadly. I think that is wrong. We need to protect our kids. We need to teach our kids basic reality. The Democrats are against science. They're against medicine. They're against common logic. They're against technological advances. I want us to be in reality here. Let's be in a reality. Somos Latinos, no somos Latinx, for goodness sakes, okay? Democrats are for infanticide. They're for late-term abortions. They don't want us to have parental rights. In fact, they want to mock us if we have any religious values. And if we have any voice that they disagree with, they want to silence us. That's totally anti-Southsiders. We Southsiders, we may not always agree, but we respect each other when we don't agree. And you can see that in me. I'm willing to speak up. Biological gender in Arizona. Women should not be competing with biological men. It's not fair. The Democrats voted against protecting biological women's sports. These are the certain things that we are voting for here in Arizona. You have to decide, do you want someone who's from your community, that loves your community, that wants to speak up strongly and isn't afraid of men, isn't afraid of someone who's trying to taunt me or say things that I didn't say? Or do you want someone who's going to speak up in the state legislature for the things that matter to this community? You know what really matters to this community? The fact that it's been going downhill because we're not keeping it safe. I also want you guys to know that I support our police, and we need our officers to know that they are part of our community, that we need them, that we respect them, we love them, and we honor them. We want them here to keep us safe, okay? Families are suffering, and those are the issues that matter, not these other things that people try to get us all distracted with. Vote for me, and the way that I'm telling people, if you like what I'm saying, they say you could pick two, pick one. Pick one, that gives me a better chance of winning. Thank you, guys.
Okay, thank you. And our Senate candidate, Ms. Brannies, take us home.
First and foremost, thank you guys for putting this on. Thank you to all of the other candidates for being here tonight. No matter what, you guys were here. And I think how you run a campaign is indicative of how you will represent the people as well. Are you accessible? I'm accessible, good, bad, and in between. We can figure it out, and everything can be worked out in conversation. But when you're not available, when you're not accessible, well, that's at the rate you can work things out. So, I also, when you were proud to have gone to public school, but while simultaneously saying you wanted to add 500 million to the budget from the sky. I mean, obviously, mathematics wasn't high at the list at that public school. But, you know, and then simultaneously they want to subsidize the developers and then tax the wealthy and tax the business owners. And I'm so frustrated and sick of this attack on the business owners, the hearts of America, the real hearts of America, the ones who nobody pays to have a day off, a sick day. Nobody pays you to be sick. Nobody's gonna pay you if you have COVID. You just keep your nose down and keep grinding to keep a roof over your head because you trust yourself more than any governmental handouts. I'll trust myself all day long before this government. You guys want governmental health care? Go get it. Like I said, go join the military. No one's gonna get in your way. If you don't think people should be unhoused, then great. Then go start businesses and go give away all your millions of dollars. No one's gonna stop you. No one's gonna get in your way. But stop trying to take my money. Stop trying to take my neighbor's money to fulfill your personal dreams. That ain't the government's role. That ain't a legislative role. So my goal is to teach the people and simultaneously learn from them myself how we can all work together to giving us the best opportunity for our actual community and take back control, because we're not being heard. We've been complaining about the same things 24/7 for years now, years. It's not an accident. It's not an accident anymore. What you permit, you promote. You want crime? Go over to 51st Avenue, 24/7. You got it. You don't got to be down the street at 43rd Avenue and Baseline pretending to look for crime. Go fix the crime that we got. Let's start making some moves. Because as citizens, you grab me 5 good citizens in an hour, we'll have the problem solved. But the government can't do it with millions of dollars, tons of resources, tons of networks. What are we doing, guys? We are the government. Let's solve our problems. Let's stop paying this imaginary government to solve our problems. We're the government. We, the people, are paying ourselves to protect ourselves from ourselves. Stop. Get to work, fend for yourself, figure it out, and help anybody and everybody you want. Government doesn't need to hold your hand to do that. So I'm Erin Brannies. I'm all about self-sufficiency. I'm all about, when all else fails, go back to basics. Read the Constitution, guys, and then let's have a conversation. And let's keep having conversations. And let's grind this out like how they used to. It's not gonna be pretty, but guess what? Like we can make things happen. So everything happens in conversation. And if you want things to happen, then let's start having some conversations. I'm Erin Brannies for State Senate, Legislative District 11. Thank you, guys.
All right. Well, that was fun. That concludes our debate. To our candidates, a sincere thank you for taking the time to participate tonight. To the voters, we thank all of you who took the time to watch the debate, inform yourselves before the November 8th general election. As a reminder, the voter registration deadline has already passed. This is still in the script, and voting begins. Oh no, you still have a couple hours. If you haven't registered to vote yet, and you are watching this, go do that now. And then you can start early voting as of tomorrow. All registered voters can participate in the general election, and we encourage you to visit azcleanelections.gov for official, accurate voting information. Thank you so much, candidates. Appreciate your time.